and looking back on life, I didn't really have really good fashion sense. For a couple of years in elementary, I used to wear penny loafers every day to school, rain, sleet, snow, didn't matter what time of the year it was. And I think from there I graduated to wearing, I had sandals that I wore from, I think, 2nd grade all the way up to the 4th grade. So it could be cold, it didn't matter, I had on sandals. But to me, it didn't really matter to me, I was happy with what I had. So I recall when I was 10, getting some Nikes. It was from Bo Jackson Nikes. I was so excited. I went home, I was so excited, and they didn't fit. So my whole Nike experience was put on hold. It was so sad. It was disheartening for me. But even when I go back to high school and junior high school and look at some of the things I used to wear, even if you saw me wearing, at the time, what Tommy Hilfiger was really in, Tommy Hilfiger, Ralph Lauren Polo, I can probably tell you probably 9 times out of 10, it were not my clothes. I was wearing hand-me-downs to my cousin who wore the same size, and I would always make sure they looked good on me. So just being honest. And but for me, what I did lack in designer clothes and some fashion sense, I made up for with the knack of preparation, being detail-oriented, and being creative. So, for one thing about me, I know I could mix and match some clothes, and God knows I could iron. I would put some creases in some jeans so tight that it would just cut your hand, and that followed me even to when I went to college and things like that. But that's just who I was. But my life, one thing I always try to remember, and I tell people, even for me, my career, I've bounced from one place to the next and been traveling all around the country and parts of the world, is that life is a journey. Even as young people, you have to remember life is a journey. You don't know where it'll take you and how you'll end up at your destination. You think you know, but you don't have a clue. If someone would have told me that I'll be doing what I'm doing now at this stage of my career, I wouldn't believe them. But in my heart, going even back then, I knew at one point that I would be going to LA. I knew I'd be working in TV and one day start my own shows and things like that. But I had no idea how I would get there. You know, I look at myself, you know, here I am, I'm from Little Rock, Arkansas. I graduated from Central High School and attended the University of Iowa. Now, I'm looking at it, and you all probably see yourself now, you're like, I'm at UAPB, I'm in Palm Bluff. You know, how do I get to where I'm trying to get to? And that's the same position I saw myself. How I go from Little Rock, I'm going to get to LA somehow. How am I going to get there? So I'm going to go to Iowa. Now I'm in the middle of nowhere still. How do I get to the coast? And I would be fascinated by it. I mean, I would obsess about it. Going to the internet, looking, and like, oh my goodness, how do I get there? How do I get there? I'm looking at pictures. How do I get there? And so I would spend a lot of time doing that. And one way I knew for me was to not really focus so much on how to get there, but just believe that I'm going to get there. And so all I can do is control where I am. So first thing for me was to become a star on my college campus. So to me, that was the first step. I became a star on my college. I was a star college student, and I took a lot of initiative. Fast forwarding from Iowa, I ended up landing in New York City. I got there, I applied for, and I received a grant to attend an entertainment media workshop in Times Square at the Marriott Marquis, right there in Times Square. But after I left there, I remember coming back to Iowa after that experience and being in New York, getting calls from Comedy Central, True TV. It was Court TV back then, but it's True TV now. MTV, Nickelodeon, they all called me and they wanted me to come and work for them in New York City, an internship. And so I ended up going with Nickelodeon. It was one of the best decisions I ever made, working there on their promotions department. And so for me, going there was an eye-opening experience. I remember my first day, I remember meeting the executive producer walking in, like, oh, hey, and everybody was just smiling, like, oh, everybody's so happy to see me. Look at it, like they know me. They're doing research on me or something. They must talk to some of my teachers, my instructors. But then come to find out, around like 1 o'clock Eastern time, come to find out that it was time for their You Pick Live show. And the reason why they were smiling because I was short and they needed someone to wear the cow costume on it. And so, needless to say, my first internship, my first experience was being a cow on TV. But at the time, my nieces and nephews saw it, they were like, Uncle Brent, that was you? Yeah, that was me. I was in the cow outfit, and I was blind. I was almost knocking over things, so it was crazy, but that was my first experience. But I ended up writing taglines for the Little Romeo show, if you all recall back then. Even as an intern, I was doing that with them. But from there, the following summer, I received a grant, and I was one of 30 students nationwide. Despite, didn't matter what ethnicity your background was, but it was a diverse group of people. So everyone, I was one of the 30 students that received a paid apprenticeship in New York City. I did mine at Fox News Channel, where I wrote and produced celebrity obit packages. So when Coretta Scott King died, for instance, you know, you see the packages all over the country and Fox News stations all around the world. I wrote and produced that before she actually died. And so that was my work. When the Pope had died, John Paul, when he died, back in, I want to say, 2005, they died pretty close together. And I had produced that as well too, way before they died. Obit packages, it's interesting, to say the least. It's kind of eerie also. But from there, I got but I didn't, at the time I still wasn't fashion, trust me, was not in my mind. All I knew, I was going to go to LA, write, produce, do something. And so, but I ended up doing my first fashion star came in LA at the Style Network. I worked on the Emmy Award show. Later, I was promoted to associate producer for Style Invades New York Fashion Week. This was when I worked with Andre Leon Talley and Jay Manuel from America's Next Top Model. And everybody knows Andre Leon Talley is, I'm sure. Okay, so this is fashion class, right? Okay. Okay, so, but fast forward, a year later, here I am traveling around the world as a writer-producer for World Wrestling Entertainment. And so, okay, I go from Little Rock to Iowa to New York City, back to Iowa, back to New York City, to LA, back to the East Coast. At a time, I didn't think I was ever going to go back to the East Coast because I was more of an LA person. It was just more my speed. I'm Southern. I kind of like it a little bit slower. And so, and then after that, you go from there to moving back to Little Rock. For my sole purpose was to launch the Little Rock Fashion Week, which came about in 2009, that summer. Which leads me to the question I always have to ask, especially since I'm in the school. What are you waiting for? What are you waiting for? People come to me all the time and say, Mr. Campbell, I want a job, or I want to do this, I want to do that. For instance, I want to be a designer. You know my answer is to them? Design. Even more importantly, I remember being in LA. Mr. Brandon, I want to be a writer. Right. You want to build a business? Build. No one's stopping you. You're here right now today, and you can make that happen now. To me, that was the approach that I took with me while I was in college, and it still follows me today. And so I always want to share that with people. I mean, going back to when I was in college, I think about, things that I was able to achieve and things I was able to do. I didn't allow, I'm at the University of Iowa, or I'm from Little Rock to hinder me from getting to the East or West, because I knew I was going to get there. So, for instance, like I said, I became a star in my own right. Forget the high school, forget anything else. I might just do what I want to do. So, from there, sophomore year, I became the president of the National Association of Black Journalists and the editor of the newspaper. Before I graduated, while I was at Iowa City, before I graduated, I was a general assignment reporter for 2 local newspapers. I wrote and produced, directed, starred in my first short movie, and I produced live events and parties and things like that. And I created an award-winning black student talk show that still exists to this day, and it's still there on campus. So my point is, when it comes to that, college is the best time of your life. So take full advantage of it. This is the period where you can explore your career and mess up over and over and over and over again. And you know what? No one's going to fire you for it in the college environment, especially when you do your internship. You have so many resources now, and you can do so many different things, but it's up to you to grab a hold of them and make the best of your situation. So there's no excuses right now. So it's up to you. Another point I always like to make is sacrifice and take calculated risks. Sacrifice, and this is what people don't understand when you're working and things like that, you're trying to get somewhere, is that sacrificing doesn't start when you get a job that's paying you. What you are doing at night now can also translate what you're going to be doing at night when you get that paying job. So what are you doing, like when you look at yourself and what you're doing right now? What are you doing at night when your friends are at Club PJ's and you know you have 2 finals the next day? How much time are you putting toward studying? Are you doing the minimum, or are you going above and beyond? It started for me when I was in college. Before going to Iowa, I had never visited Iowa. I didn't know anything. All I knew that it was in the Midwest somewhere and it was out of the norm, so I knew I was going to go there. But I knew it was going to be the place that I needed to go to prepare me to be a writer. All I knew I was going to write. So I knew I was going to go to Iowa to be a writer. Never visited. I went to LA without ever visiting LA. I just knew I wanted to go to LA. Didn't know anybody in LA. Didn't really have any connections in LA. In fact, for the first 2 weeks, I stayed in a hostel in LA, right in Hollywood. I remember getting there, flying out there, bought a one-way ticket. I said, yeah, drive me to this hostel in Hollywood. The shuttle took me there, Prime shuttle took me there. And honestly, I remember arriving in Hollywood and saying, this is it? This is Hollywood? This is what I've been waiting for since I was 12 years old. This is Hollywood. Okay, and I ended up staying in the seediest hostel I could find, but it was cheap. I think it was like $20, $30. And so the money that I saved from my apprenticeship helped take care of me while I was out there for those couple of weeks. But I stayed in the hostel, didn't have anything, but I believed in myself and in God. Everything worked out fine. And for instance, when WWE called and they saying, hey, we want you to come and work for us, but come back to the East Coast. At the time, I wasn't watching WWE. I wasn't really messed about no wrestling at the time. I'm like, huh? And when he told me that it was in Connecticut, I was like, wait a minute, y'all can't do this here in LA? Because I do not want to go back to the East Coast. But all I want to do is do what? I want to write. I wanted to write, I wanted to produce. So if an opportunity came about, I took that opportunity, even though it was a change of scenery, but I knew it was going to be a learning experience for me, and it was going to make me more well-rounded. And especially being around those different personalities. I mean, you're around John Cena and Mark Henry, the world's strongest man, and Kane, who has pain and things all over his face, and it was just kind of interesting. But I learned a whole lot those couple of years while I was there. And then, for me, just to be honest, when I go back to, starting Fashion Week. Fashion Week while I was in Connecticut was a random thing. Just cleaning up my house one day. And voila, the idea came to me. It was Fashion Week. It was like, oh, wow. Fashion Week, this is what I'm going to do. And I'm going to tell you right now, I knew, you got the song that says, what is it? Have a little talk with Jesus. Tell him all about you. Oh, I had a bunch of talks with Jesus. Like, you want me to do what? And you want me to come back to Little Rock to do what? Fashion Week? And I'm like, you know what? I was doing that when I was at Style Network and Invades New York Fashion Week and all that, but Fashion Week in Little Rock. And I didn't know anything about the market. I'm like, I'm going to come back to Little Rock to do what? So I started doing my research and things like that, and started making the sacrifice that was necessary for me. I gave up that part of my career to come back to launch Little Rock Fashion Week. And so what I'm saying is, when I was talking about making sacrifices and making calculated risks, what I did in college prepared me So when we have all those long hours of studying and you have to write those 10-page papers and things like that, and they're all due the same week. When you then go to LA, for me, this is personal experience, then when I go to LA and you're working for a production, say, The Biggest Loser, Beauty and the Beast, or America's Next Top Model, and you're there on set for 12, 14, 16 hours, making $90. Not an hour, a day. And they don't when they do it, when they break it down, if it's 12 hours, they just break it down to where you still get paid 90 hours a day. And so if it's like, oh, we're going to show overtime, you still got paid $90 or $100 a day. I'm not sure what the rate is, but I'm pretty sure it hasn't increased since then. It hasn't been that long ago. And so that's what I'm trying to say when it comes to sacrificing and doing the things that's necessary so you to succeed. And it starts today. It doesn't start once you get to LA. And that's a lot of people, they come and they say, hey, I'm going to work. You know what? Forget UAPB. Forget this fashion department. You know what? When I go to New York, boy, that's when I'm going to turn it on. Watch and see. You know what? You know what? You know, this is all good. Thank you, Miss K. Thank y'all. You know, this was cool. But you know what? I'm going to Dallas anyway, and I'm going to blow up. Or I'm just going to be on Project Runway anyway. We live in that day and age where people want success overnight, and they think it's going to happen overnight without the sacrifice, without putting in the work. Those people that you see on probably America's Next Top Model and all those other shows, first of all, I can tell you from experience as a producer, it's a show. When the show is over with, they start another show. And then after that, when they start the other show, then what do you do? They're on to the next 10, 13, 15 contestants. And the life in the world just keeps moving. It's a machine. So, and another thing is I have to mention, take pride in your work and foster relationships. For instance, for me, New York wasn't my place of choice. I've already mentioned that. But I knew by doing a good job at Nickelodeon and going to the East Coast and developing those relationships and fostering really good relationships that it would get me to LA somehow. And I knew that these people here, they know people over there, because usually the people on the East Coast are the ones with the money. Anyway, they got to tell them what to do on the West Coast. Hey, we want to do a show here on the West Coast. Okay, well, let's see how much money we got here. Disney on the Disney on the East Coast, in order for them to even run and do anything. But I knew that was very important to me. So everything you do on internships and jobs will follow you. Don't think, you know, after your experience, even here at the UAPB, at this experience here, that, you know, I'm just going to turn it on. I ain't going to, you know, whatever, I'm just going to, here go a dress. Oh, here you go. And they can look and tell you didn't put no time into it. But you know what? But when I go to New York, oh, I'm going to be right there in the mecca of fashion. I'm turning it on right then and there. You have to take pride in what you do now and pay great attention to detail now. It starts today, not later on. Your name is valuable, so you must protect it at all costs. And you have to remember that fashion and entertainment business, they're hard, but it's important that you deal with it in the correct and professional way. Remember, if you say you're going to do something, do it, because your name is on it. Once you say, I'm going to do it, your name is on it. And if you're the person who drops the ball, you're just going to be remembered as the person who dropped the ball. Doesn't matter if it's here, a paid job, internship, or anything. Do the little things right. That's how I believe that I became a name in LA, in New York, because I did the little things right. Whether it was an email, I would sit there and look at that email 20 minutes, making sure that there's no grammatical errors, because I was a stickler like that. I have a journalism background, so I knew that once that email goes out, that's who I am, to a person that doesn't really know me. When I send my resume, grammatical errors, anything like that, my name is on the top of that, Brandon Campbell. So if they see that, this don't make sense. What is this? This person didn't do no research. So before they even meet me, Brandon Campbell is a person who doesn't do research, and it's not detail oriented. So you have to do that in order to earn the respect of your bosses and those around you. Be tenacious. Don't give up. That's important. Like for instance, for me, when I think about my jobs and things I'm doing now, my relationships back then that I had in doing jobs in different coasts and all over the place have benefited me and Little Rock Fashion Week today. I've gotten executives to come to Little Rock Fashion Week based off of the work and relationship that we developed, you know, several years ago. And they say, oh, you doing Little Rock Fashion Week? Oh, wow, I didn't know Little Rock. Yeah, I own it. Really? And they're happy to come down. Because, Brandon, you're a good person. I remember you used to work hard, so I know this is going to be great. Also, I received a lot of advice from these same exact people. These are millionaires. These are the Vince McMahons of the world. People that I used to fly around on private jets with. This has been very important to really the launch of Little Rock Fashion Week. They helped me so much on the direction I needed to go in. And that's why today with Fashion Week, it's Little Rock Fashion Week. It's not nobody else's Fashion Week. It's Little Rock Fashion Week, and there's always going to be something different each year. And for instance, you have to remember that you have to be respectful to your bosses and also your assistants. Even if I'm a PA, this other person's a PA, I know we're competing or whatever for the job, but be cordial, be a friend, develop those relationships, develop relationships with the internships, because you never know, one day they may become your boss or they may be able to give you an opportunity as well, and you just never know. But people look out for each other too, and they remember your name as well, as I was mentioning. And when I go back to relationships, I'm just happy, especially when WWE comes into town, I'm able to get free tickets and I can go and sit front row. Oh, Little Rock, you come on, we come to Little Rock. They texted me already, what we gonna do? I'm like, oh man, I have to tell her like, oh, hey, I'm gonna be out for a whole night because they're gonna want to go and do this. I'm not gonna go into too much detail what they like to do, but that's their prerogative. Okay, and then another thing is you have to prepare yourself for it. And that is to hear the no, because you're going to hear a lot of them, but don't accept them. People tell me no all the time, but it's like, no, okay, no, no, what? It's like it's going in my ear, going out the other one, but I know who said no, and I know it, but I understand it, I don't hold a grudge, but that helps you. If you can't understand and accept no, you're going to have a hard time in this business, whether it's fashion, entertainment, media, what have you. No is contagious. And so for me, I heard a lot of no's in LA, or sometimes I didn't even get a response. Hey, I want to apply for this producing job. Tick, tock, tick, talk. What I'm going to do is sit there and wait to hear a no. I'm just going to keep on moving so I can hear a no. So I can then move on and get some yeses. So you always have to keep that in mind as well. But for me, what was interesting for me, I heard the most no's I've ever heard. I'm like, I've been to LA, I've been to New York, I've been everywhere, was when I started Little Rock Fashion Week. Oh my goodness, I was just like, man, my whole entire city telling me no. I'm born and raised here. I thought I was going to be like, yay, Brandon's back. We love him. Thank you for coming back.
Banners.
I know, right? Banners like, yeah, he didn't even have to come back. But it was like, nah, okay, who are you? Yeah, okay. Some people didn't even think I was from Little Rock. They had to research, like, oh, he ain't from here. He's just coming down here to do something and go back to where he's coming from. But there were a lot of people that doubted me, the vision, and simply just didn't want Little Rock Fashion Week to happen. I remember a quote, a lot of quotes from Tyler Perry, but I remember Tyler Perry said, it's good when people doubt you because you end up owning all your projects. So that leads me to where I am today. You know, I'm happy that all those people told me no because it helped establish me in the Little Rock Fashion Week as its own brand. My vision for Little Rock Fashion Week even back then, since the beginning, was to establish a vehicle for opportunities. And I'm proud of what we've been able to accomplish heading now into our 5th year of Little Rock Fashion Week, which will be July the 15th through the 20th, 2013. Some of my favorite numbers, and it's so interesting how July 15 plus 5, 20, plus 5. 2013, I like the number 3. So, but anyway, so it's 5 years a year of grace. So I'm looking forward to big things. In 5 years, and I look at Little Rock Fashion Week is now internationally known. We have showcased 75 different fashion lines, both locally, nationally, and internationally. Launched the careers of designers who now have clothes in department stores, boutiques. They get invites to fashion weeks all over the country, including those in New York City. Been able to discover models who have been in a lot of different campaigns, national ad campaigns for Dillard's, Levi's, and even in magazines such as Teen Vogue. And our interns have gone on to get jobs at CNN, O Magazine, Dillard's, BET, and also national PR firms nationwide. And even more important to me and the people that I work with is that we do a lot for the community. Last year, which actually was on my heart back in 2010, I to decide to do something for youth, younger people in grades 1st through 12th grade, and that was the Youth Sketch Design Competition, where students would then come up with their own designs by just drawing them out. To me, I believe in just starting. So a lot of times, if you're a creative person, you just start. You start by, when you're doing fashion, by doing the sketch. So they started doing the sketch. We did our first competition this past Fashion Week from grades 1st to 12th grade. It was something very important to me, and I look forward to continuing to do that. Little Rock School District Reading Day. We're doing the third time participating in that on Tuesday. I'll be reading to, I think, 3rd and 4th grade students at Baseline Elementary, and that's when we bring in some of our models and people who work with Fashion Week. Work with the Watershed, Susan G. Coleman, Race for the Cure, Easter Seals, and also the Greek Food Festival, Big Brothers and Big Sisters, which I'm now a mentor to a little over at Brady Elementary School. And when I going back to even when I think about Fashion Week and starting it, I remember Hezekiah Stewart, the Reverend over there at the Watershed, telling me, and I remember he helped me out a lot, but he told me, you got to do it. Honestly, we did Fashion Week. I didn't move back here until the spring of '09, even though I had already did my research and started laying the groundwork. Got my staff, probably like finalized toward the end of June. We had the model search July the 11th. We had Fashion Week August the 12th through the 15th. And boy, was I stressed. But like I said, I had a lot of talks with Jesus. And I was just so happy that Reverend Stewart was in my presence. He told me. He said, he looked at me, I was in his office. You got to do it. So what do you mean? You got to do it. It doesn't matter. He said, it doesn't matter if 20 people show up. You got to do it. And I just remember at the time when people were telling me, hey, you want to do it in October? Push it back. Do it next year. And I was like, He told me to do it now. Because if I wait, who say somebody else would have picked it up? It's probably an idea that's been out there, but it takes a person to do it. You got to do it. And then going back to what gave me confidence of going back to Tyler Perry is when he did his first theater production. And I remember he saying he's paid all this money, spent a lot of the money to do it. And I thought about myself, and during the first Fashion Week, I spent tens of thousands of dollars of my own money because sponsors were not touching it. And nobody, they didn't want to put their brand next to it or anything. Some people did, but they weren't trying to give me not a dollar. And so I spent my own money into it. But I remember Tyler Perry saying that he did his production, spent a lot of money. He said like 10 people showed up in that big old auditorium. 10 people. I said, wow, if he can go through only 10 people, I think I can be okay with 20 people. But so it so happened that over 2,000 people showed up throughout those few days we had the first Little Rock Fashion Week. So I'm very grateful for that. And so my point is, you all are in the perfect place to start your career, but it's going to be up to you to allow it to happen. That concludes my